So I guess today I was thinking we could talk about sort of this crutch of companion apps, and you see it all over YouTube, and some folks mention it. I think Casey Neistat, the YouTuber and sort of famous vlogger from New York, he's mentioned it once or twice in some of his videos. But sort of this idea that so many products nowadays require some kind of app, and I'm using that term sort of generically, but require some kind of off-site or off-device software. So if I buy a skateboard or a toaster or something, they require me to log onto a website, create an account, and like all this nonsense. I'm like, it's a toaster. You should put the toast in, you push the button, and like it works. And I get the skateboard, I stand on the skateboard, and I slide around, right? But sort of this crutch of, oh, we'll just do software, and then we don't have to build a decent product. But I think why this becomes truly fascinating is sort of, in part, eliminates the longevity of a product. Because let's say that product goes out of business, that company goes out of business, that product team no longer supports that product, like whatever have you. Well, now I can't use the skateboard or the toaster because they don't want to update the website. Like, why are these related? And one is sort of based in this transaction interaction with me and like the store that I buy the product, and then sort of one lives in more of a constantly changing, constantly updating world that we live in today of software, where it's mostly reliant on subscriptions, right? You buy your Netflix on subscription, you buy your digital magazine, you sort of sponsor somebody on Patreon for their YouTube channel, whatever have you. Those are sort of all subscriptions, and you're paying for these. You're paying incrementally for incremental changes. But when you buy like a toaster or a skateboard, you tend not to think about it as an incremental thing. You think of it as a one-time transaction. And I thought that's an interesting one, and I think we can even talk about a big company, Pebble, that made watches for the longest time, and then they got bought out by Fitbit. I think in their case, it's a little bit off, not so much related, because half of their product was truly software. But even people, their fans, they were like, well, what's going to happen as soon as you get bought out by Fitbit? Now the watch isn't going to work. What am I going to do with it? All this sort of interesting components. And I think that's an interesting topic that people are aware of. But I think it's truly silly that it's reliant on these half-baked, half-done software products from teams that really aren't in the business of doing software. I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that to bring up the question of what is the use, or what are the uses of these companion apps, and of a skateboard. That's kind of funny. You kind of reference the creation of it, like why, and also the maintenance of it. Like, if the app doesn't work, can I not use my product then? And that actually reminds me of, or makes me think about, the forceful integration of yourself, into this economy. I don't know if we can call it a gig economy, because they're selling you some form of data in one way or another. It's kind of like another channel, another way of getting you into this economy,
right?
And keeping you there. And there isn't any reason as to why it should exist.
Yeah.
But not as a whole, but in particular examples, like a skateboard, or if I buy a fan. And
yeah, right.
I mean, it's kind of nice to be able to maybe operate the fan with your iPhone, but it's just a super luxury.
Right.
How often would you use it that way?
Well, even if, right, I still want a fallback. I want a physical button so I can turn the fan on and off, because maybe the Wi-Fi is not working that day. The Bluetooth doesn't work. My phone's like doing something weird, or the phone battery's dead. Well, want to use the fan without the crutch. So I think that's the key. The requirement of, not the addition to. So if you have an app that gives you some extra fun features, okay, fine. Like, I'm okay with that. But if you can't use the product without it, and it's not critical to the experience, like on a skateboard, that's obnoxious.
Yeah.
Where I could see a good example being, hey, you want to use our skateboard? We can share maybe the battery life, and we can record your GPS route and record your speed, and we can do this on the phone if you'd like it. Okay, fair enough. If not, you leave the phone at home and you can just ride around for, like, as a normal person, and you look down and you see the battery indicator, and then fine, no worries.
Yeah, true. I mean, it reminds me of, as a matter of fact, the DVD players that you could only operate with a remote.
Oh
And
yeah,
I don't know if you've ever had that, but who it resonates with. But I mean, like, there's DVD players that you can only operate with a remote. You lose the remote, and you can't even choose.
You can't use it.
Yeah, you can't use it.
Yeah, that's annoying.
And this is the remote was the companion app.
Basically, right. It was the OG companion app.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it just kind of draws us into, forcefully sometimes, into a world of bits, into a world of, I don't know how to call it, if it's a cloud, if it's kind of like this gigafied, world of products that you can only operate them, or you can only exist within them, in a form of kind of a companion app, or in a form, some sort of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost feels like, this has kind of theoretical underpinnings, but like it feels like we're being forced to become cyborgs. We cannot operate or live, or imagine you can't open your house without your iPhone. You can't operate your fridge or order milk or anything without your iPhone. You slowly become a human with an inextricable component of technology that's outside of you. It's not necessarily, it doesn't even need to be inside of your physical body.
Yeah.
But it's inside of your social body. It's inside of your person, and be able to kind of operate in society. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, and I think one sort of simple version of that, if you ask somebody today, hey, what's your friend's phone number? Everyone's gonna say, I don't know. I just click it in the contacts, right? Like, none of us remember phone numbers anymore. We just click the icon.
It's a very good example. Yeah.
That's sort of the simple take that's been happening for many years before sort of fancy technology, as I'm gonna call it right now. But these mobile applications and really sophisticated portable electronics. But I think that something you said earlier was sort of this idea of, well, maybe you're not leasing these products with monetary, like cash or whatever, but you're leasing it sort of with your data, this sort of megabyte currency, data currency, rather than a dollar currency. And I think that's an interesting point. Maybe that's exactly what you're doing, right? I mean, there was a article or a publication that mentioned sort of Fitbit, and how at one of the earthquakes, probably a year or so ago in California, they could find the epicenter faster than the like weather folks and sort of the weather and NOAA like people, because what they could find out is when people started waking up in the middle of the night. And the people who woke up earlier, and they could draw sort of the pattern and find out where the epicenter works, right? Like, they're collecting that data, and that's sort of part of your subscription. Yeah. Or I think a couple weeks ago, there was an article that came out that sort of decided the fate of Vizio TV. So I think a while ago, people were saying, hey, what's going on? This Vizio TV is recording me. Is this legal? Da, 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 da. And an article came out and said, well, to some extent, yes, because you agreed to their sort of terms. But the other thing is, you have to think, like, what are you paying for? You're paying, like, some quite reasonable price for a like wonderful new piece of technology, but in exchange, we're going to record your interaction. Rather than you buy a more fancy, expensive TV, which is probably very similar in quality to viewing, but you don't have to provide that data.
Yeah.
And maybe that data goes somewhere beneficial for benefiting the product, like it goes to user research type of folks or product team, like you were mentioning previously in sort of the last episode about sort of different roles and what does it mean to be a designer. Or maybe it just goes to, oh, we can sell people more ads at 5 p.m. versus 10 p.m. and like, haha, we can make more money off of you. Who knows? Right?
well, I'm going to be the cynic and say that I know, and it's going to the latter, right? They want to connect data from you so that they can capitalize, they can profit off of that. But you bring up several good points. The other one of being surveillance, and this, what is really being offered, sold. What is the intention of these companion apps? What kind of information do they want to get from you? Also connections to the quantified self movement, which has to do with quantifying yourself and as just discrete information that you can upload to an app, and then that could be used to sell you things, indirectly compose maybe a sort of profile of you as an individual or of you as a group.
Right.
And then that data is sold. I mean, the fact that, for example, Facebook can track you even after you have, logged off of Facebook is scary. You have IP addresses, MAC addresses. They can keep tracking you.
Right.
And so there is almost a sense that you exist outside of your body in a quantified form somewhere on a server or several hundreds of servers, right?
Right.
And how that information could be used, could be aggregated, or could be recomposed, or for whatever ends. And the way that we are currently living in, we could say that it's probably to sell you something. I don't know if you've seen this on the internet, and it's pretty popular now. I mean, everybody knows this kind of phrasing, but when you don't know what the product is, you're the product, right? I don't know who started saying that, and I can't quote it to anyone, but that makes you think, when that is, I think, when you should be more careful when there's free things being offered to you.
Right, because nothing's ever free.
Yeah.
There's some transaction that's happening whether you know about it or not. I think this idea of quantified self is sort of interesting, and actually there was a great piece that was done. I think it was a thesis project at NYU, actually. I'm not sure if it was a thesis exactly. I think it was, but it was at the ITP at NYU, and it's called Expose, which is X, the letter, dot POSE. And it was basically this project where this student had created this dress with these electrochromatic panels. So these are panels that, when charged with an electrical current, they can change between being transparent or opaque. And what she would do was she connected this up to her phone and basically traced all the data packets leaving her phone. And the more data that was leaving, the more transparent or naked the dress would go. To show,
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and basically to show, hey, look, this is a literal thing that's happening, and here's a visualization that like more people will understand than trying to see. Oh, look, check it out! Like 3 kilobytes went to Facebook. Like nobody understands. Well, let me say nobody, but there's fewer people who know what that means than such a visualization of a physical like body being exposed.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect metaphor. You're being exposed, you're being put out there, you're some form of your reconstructed self is being put on display and for others to see, and you don't know who's seeing.
Right.
So then there's definitely that that problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's a surveillance of. I mean, it could be anything. Like it's a surveillance of the state with things, with the government, for example, keeping track of all of your information and your text and all of that. And some form, this is not like a conspiracy theory. We can kind of look these things up. Or corporations. The fact that you're going through their networks, they're keeping your information out there and surveilling you. You're never really. I mean, when are you just you? I guess, but the question is maybe better put is how many people in the United States are actually not in some way being recorded, or their data, their quantifying self being recorded, on some form of digital platform. I believe that, or I would imagine that number is really small.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, if you connect to the internet at all, there you go, because you're connecting with some kind of vendor, an ISP, whether that's a mobile carrier like Verizon, AT&T, or whatever, or you're connecting with some landline provider like a Comcast or a Fios, Verizon, or Time Warner, right? I mean, that you're not the infrastructure and the access point. You're using someone else's access point and infrastructure to connect to this sort of information trove. So somewhere along the lines, data is being collected, whether you want to or not. And in many cases, you're paying them to collect the data because the value put on the access is higher than the value put on the data.
Yes, exactly. No, that definitely has a lot of like different avenues to kind of really ask when there is a companion app to a product, what is really happening there.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the example that you gave of the NYU student doing that. I mean, I wonder if there is some sort of subversive movement where there's like more apps like these that they can actually track what's leaving your phone and what's and sort of kind of demand that, because if you take this to its logical conclusion, we are basically going to have a world where you're completely almost immersed in some form of digital space, digital kind of reality. Not virtual reality, but just this digital way of being.
Right. Well, I always think of the scene in Minority Report. That movie from, I guess it's like 2002 or 2003 now. I think maybe even older, but where Tom Cruise is just gotten his eye surgery, so he can no longer be tracked, and he's walking through the mall, and every ad is reading his eyes, and it knows, hey, oh, you're like this teenage girl. Oh, let me try and sell you dresses. So all the ads that pop up all the way he's walking are for like these dresses and makeup or whatever have you, and it's like, look at that. He didn't even do anything. It's sort of this passive experience, but the world around him is reacting and forcing this sort of digital self because they assume something about one particular piece of him for him to make a purchase and basically create more transactions.
Yeah, exactly. How does this tie into design, right? I mean, you have the obvious things of how to design a companion app, and then questioning what is it for and what is it kind of recording. But just to take it a little bit in the nutty side and beyond that, it's contributing to, as we talk about the quantified self movement and all that, there is a sort of influential sort of digital mentality that is being put out there, right? The fact that you as an individual the concept of individualism was an invention. It didn't exist throughout our history. At some point, there was the invention of the individual. The fact that you exist outside of your environment, outside of anything surrounding you. And then that was completely be pushed towards the discrete description of you and what you are as a single entity, right? And then today further being quantified further, right? Like what is your body weight? What is your, your race? What is your ethnicity? Imagine all of those boxes that you have to tick through when you're applying for college or you're applying, for grad school or whatever, or the census. I don't know. All of a sudden, you're kind of ticking off or discreetly representing yourself in different forms. And so, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that we keep pushing this. We keep finding ourselves as just an accumulation of data. And we lose sight of the fact that we cannot really, in reality, exist without an analog signal. The analog self, for example, this is what I explore in my own work. And you in connection to yourself, you in connection to your environment, you in connection to other people, you in connection to society and everything else. That notion makes sense just at that surface level. Yeah, we're connected to everything else, but do you actually really think that? Because from what we are creating here, producing with technology and designing, we are actually more along the lines of thinking of ourselves as discrete individuals that could basically travel everywhere, live anywhere, do anything, completely severed and disconnected from anything that surrounds us. And that isn't entirely, actually, that is not true at all.
Right.
There's always a connection with you and everything else. And so, like, to kind of end this thought, if we keep just creating these, artifacts or the companion apps or these kind of, things that further are, further throw us into this mentality of discrete and digital self and digital, existence, then we're going to become unable to be self-sufficient. We're going to then depend on these because we do not see the connections to everything else. I don't know if this makes sense. What do you think about this?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, look, that's what half of, I would say, Hollywood is sort of about. Whenever they have these dystopia shows, right? They sort of, let's imagine we have zero power, right? There was a TV series called Revolution for a couple of seasons, which was basically that. They said, well, imagine the world with zero electricity. Okay, well, everything today runs on electricity because everything is such a digital experience. The banking infrastructure, the healthcare systems, everything is somehow linked to a digital product. So if you lose electricity, you sort of lose all of it. So the show was sort of about, imagine us going back to sort of the Stone Age a little bit, and what do we do without all this dependency? And I think even the simple thing of us depending on our phones for contact information. I mean, there's a huge group of people that today, thanks to sort of wonderful products like ride-sharing Lyfts and Ubers of the world, or GrabCat or Didi Chong in Asia, is, well, we don't need a car. This is how we get around. Well, your phone's dead. Now what? You can't get home, right? Like, and that's a legitimate problem that people face, and it's a legitimate opportunity for these companies to exploit. There was an article probably a year ago, sort of digressing a little bit, but I think there was an article specifically about Uber, that they could read how much battery you had left on your phone, and they would charge you more when it was less than 10%, because they knew you were going to do it anyways, because you didn't have a choice.
Jeez, yeah.
So it's like, hey, look, this is you win some, but you lose some because there's such a huge dependency that now it's a crutch, just like these companion apps to physical products, sort of on a large scale. But now, as a product owner or a product company, I can now exploit your dependency and your crutch on all of these things and get more out of you.
Yeah, no, that is an excellent kind of point and rebuttal on how also understanding the self as in connection to the environment and situation and circumstance, that it is kind of co-opted or kind of reappropriated to your disadvantage, right? And to kind of this capitalistic way of or just capitalism, right? Capitalizing on your situation, the fact that your phone battery connects to your situation. You need to get a car before you have no way of getting home, or whatever else, especially if it says, if the time on your phone says like 4 a.m. or, or 3:30 or something.
Right.
And you're right. So there, I don't know how to kind of reconcile that. So there is kind of this mentality, this analog mentality, knowing that we are connected to everything else, but then that is being exploited in this kind of digital way, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think honestly, to sort of wrap this up as one thought, and I think we'll continue this at another time, but sort of this gets us into talking about designing securities and designing around security and what that means, whether that's simple tools like virus protection or that kind of thing, or a VPN, a virtual private network, where you sort of try and circumvent some of these things, or more holistically, how do we help inform people about these issues, so that we teach through design. That's sort of my 2 cents on maybe we should talk to designing around security and for security at some future date.
Yeah, definitely. The only thing I wanted to add was that we should, in design, ask these questions of why are we getting these free apps? What are these? If it doesn't make sense to you, keep asking those questions. Like we will probably talk about in another episode about curiosity.
Yes.
Being critical about the way that you produce, that you design, what you do, and questioning and asking these things. Because even if you're designing for others, ultimately, others are designing for you, and you're designing for yourself. And so, if you don't ask these and just kind of go with the flow, there's a lot of inherent problems in that.
Yeah.
That could have serious social and even individual kind of implications.
No, for sure. I think that's a great place to end, and I think on that note, we have to always be curiosity, as we like to say, right? So
that's right.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Design Gold. To learn more about the show, follow us online at DesignGold.xyz.